uh, pieces of all of this that I think that people need to hear and hear from as many different viewpoints and as many different um, data points as they possibly can. And what I'm trying to do here is, the internet to me is intended for originally for information and learning and connecting, and it's kind of turned into a little bit of nonsense over the over the years. And I'm just trying to take this um, median and give it back to what I think it should be. And as I mentioned to you, I'm using Twitch and the Out of the Park game because it's a software, it's a game program that you can set up any piece of Major League Baseball history, Negro League Baseball history that you want, and it's a whole nother world. Tends to be a younger audience, and I'm trying to get these stories out so that the next generation of fans and future researchers and are interested in these types of subjects because I think it's important. So, your thoughts on since why I've started this, and part of this is stems from the pandemic shutting down last year's centennial, but the 1920 Negro League national season and its impact on not just 1920 but baseball and the country in general, because it set the stage for so many things to come in the coming decades.
Can you hear me?
I think so. Is your microphone on? Yeah, we got you.
Okay. Yes. So as you mentioned, like you said, the 1920 season, of course, we all know last year celebrated the 100-year anniversary of the Negro Leagues, 1920 to 2020. But yeah, the 1920 year of the Negro Leagues was phenomenal. I mean, you want to bring up, when you talk about the 1920 season, you got to talk about Ruth Foster. He
Yes.
was a mastermind behind orchestrating the Negro Leagues. He understood that our players, African American players, will not have a chance of playing the majors. So he wanted to create his own league. Unfortunately, like you said, there was a lot of things going on back in those days with the racism and
Yes.
some of the things that we're going through right now, 100 years later.
Hmm.
And I always said that I'm pretty sure that my great grandfather's up in heaven looking down and seeing that his great grandson, other family members are still going through some of the same things
Hmm.
that he went through, over 90 years ago. But the 1920 um, year for the Negro Leagues was phenomenal because it started a trailblazing, a trailblazing for African Americans to show their talent on the baseball diamond. And not only that, though, even though Pittsburgh was not one of the original 8 teams, um, Ruth Foster, I know they met in Kansas City, and they came together and decided to come up with the Negro National League. And
Hmm.
so, as we say, uh, and before I say this, I believe it wasn't for Ruth Foster. I believe it wasn't for Ruth Foster. We know Josh Gibson.
Hmm.
Um, you know, because we know back then the white major leaguers was not, what the white teams were not taking black players, and so I credit Ruth Foster for making Josh Gibson the person he is and he was back then.
Absolutely. Hey, yeah, I think if you can mute the Twitch, because that's I think we're getting a little echo there, unfortunately. As I've explained to you, I mean, I have to. Zoom and Twitch don't share cameras very well, so I
Yeah,
have to.
I heard that too. So I just turned it off.
All right,
Sounds a
awesome.
lot better.
So no, I'm with you. I mean, I think he was such a visionary, and the style of play that the Negro Leagues had. Um, Look at what happens, once Jackie Robinson does come into Major League Baseball. I mean, it totally revolutionized the game, and it's no coincidence. I mean, it bugs me. For decades, it's bugged me when I hear people say that it wasn't the level of talent. I mean, are you kidding me? These guys literally became MVPs of their leagues for the next decade after that. I mean, it just totally changed the game. So what was the style of play that you would describe the Negro Leagues as? What was that like?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought the other point up though when they said about their talent, Negro League's
Oh,
talent, and my question will always be, what makes you think that Major League Baseball talent was so great?
exactly. Oh,
Um,
let me just point this out, right? You know what bugs the heck out of me, right? No, Josh Gibson was not the white Babe Ruth or the black Babe Ruth. I mean, Babe Ruth was the white Josh Gibson, and Pop Lloyd was not the black Honus Wagner. I mean, these guys were ball players, and they all knew that who was the better players. And this white and black, comparison, it's really unfair.
yeah. But as far as the style of play, I definitely think that one, our style of play was a lot more a lot faster. I would definitely say that a lot more entertaining.
Hmm.
I believe America lost some great history between the 1920 and 1947 because having these Negro League baseball players playing in a major, it definitely would have brought a lot more excitement, a lot more style, a lot more grace, definitely speed,
Hmm.
um, a lot of power. And so it definitely would have changed the game in the major leagues. And I think those fans in those early years definitely missed out on some great baseball, not being able to integrate Negro League baseball players into the majors.
Absolutely. And it's just like with the 2020 comparison with the pandemic and the social climate. Look at where the game is at today. I mean, we're at this like three true outcome of walk, strikeout, home run, and I got to say that's not the most exciting style of play. Maybe we need to bring the Negro Leagues back into 2020 because people, I think, enjoy that style of play so much more. You've seen the highlights, right? I mean, people are actually going crazy over guys getting bunt doubles against the shift. I mean, I mean, it's way more fun. I mean, yeah, the home run is great, and it has its
Yeah.
place, but I think that style of play that we're talking about is really. It's baseball. It's exciting. So I know that like I mentioned to you, I had the privilege of meeting your dad back in or granddad in the early '90s, and right after that, I think is when he started the Josh Gibson Foundation. Right? What year was that? '94,
Started the foundation in 96, something like that.
'96. Okay, and then you took over running it not too long after that, right?
Right. That's long after that. Yeah, I got involved in it. Matter of fact, I'm sorry, I got involved in it in '96. He started in '94,
Okay, all right,
so I got involved 2 years later. Yep.
and what when he set that up, it was more than just the thoughts of keeping, the legacy of Josh Gibson going. What was the intentions? What was the foundations in the beginning? Um, where was it headed, and where is it today?
Well, my grandfather Junior, when he came, when he thought about the foundation, the main thing he wanted was to keep his father's legacy alive, as well as the other great Negro League baseball players,
Hmm.
especially here in the Pittsburgh area. He always considered the Grays and the Crawford the two greatest teams in the Negro Leagues. And so he felt as though we had a lot of history right here in Pittsburgh. And then, of course, you got Josh Gibson and some of the other great players who played here. Why not start a foundation? But the main goal back then is mainly just educating a lot of people about the Negro Leagues. I mean, still today, a lot of people don't know about the Negro Leagues, but even
Hmm.
back then, almost 30 years later, people still did. They really didn't know about the Negro Leagues back then.
Hmm.
And so we started off with a small educational program and a baseball program. And we started off just mainly just giving the kids history about each team they were on. All the teams were named after the Negro League baseball teams.
Awesome.
And then we had all the awards named after the players. So it kind of started that way. And then once we start involving more kids in our program, that's when we started adding the educational components. We started off with after school program. And now we have grown from that period of time until now to over 300 kids. We have 3 sites. We have several programs from a curriculum in the schools called BOSA. And our BOSA program, I'm real proud of this program because it's called Business and Sports Academy, and it teaches kids the business side of sports. And one of our board members came up with this idea is that, there are so many opportunities for kids behind the scenes that they have no clue about, because most kids want to, of course, become a professional athlete. And we always know that percentage is very small, but why not still be involved in the game of sports behind the scenes? So our courses are go from sports marketing, sports media, sports law, sports sales, sports events. We're about to add in sports training. And so we're really
Awesome.
excited about that program. It has been excited about it. It's a college credit course as well. And so, but
Very
due to the
cool.
pandemic, as you mentioned, all of our sites were closed last year. We are a small nonprofit, so we're doing a lot of fundraising to try to catch up. And so we're excited about this year, and hopefully, it seems like we'll be able to have our fundraisers this year to recoup some of the funds that we lost last year. So, but the foundation has definitely grown, and all credit goes to my grandfather, Josh Gibson Jr. He was a visionary, and he was the one who got everything started, and I just took over the torch, and trying to raise the torch as high as I can.
There's a great point, right? You talk about that word visionary, right? You mentioned that already. Rube Foster was a visionary. J.L. Wilkinson with the Monarchs was a pioneer and a visionary. I mean, look at the things that the Negro Leagues were doing long before Major League Baseball was. The first night games with lights and promotional nights like women's nights and so forth. Pittsburgh Negro Leagues, Gus Greenlee. Uh, wasn't that the first uh, ballpark that was built exclusively for a Negro League team in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, Gus Greenlee built his own stadium right here in the city of Pittsburgh area called the Hill District. At the time, I think it held 7,500 people, and when he built it, I think it was about $100,000 at the time. But
Wow,
yeah,
it's a lot of
and
money for
Gus
back then.
back then, right?
Yeah,
But Gus the same way. I mean, he definitely knew how to make a profit, because his story is he owned the Crawford Grill, the famous Crawford Grill. But he also ran numbers. He was a numbers
yeah.
guy, as we call the day of the lottery. And so, but one thing about Gus, though, he was very generous. He helped out a lot of people in the community. He made sure that people were well taken care of if they needed any help or anything. So, but he definitely was another guy who had a vision, and he felt like, why should I keep renting Forest Field and paying
Right.
all this money to rent Forest Field when I could just build my own stadium and I can get everything, I get all the money. So he was smart.
Absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of these things, it really comes down to the money aspect, right? I mean, all the innovations, and that's why I think these guys were so brilliant. I mean, like you had mentioned them, they it, one of the misconceptions about I think the Negro Leagues and I think even the press back in the early days was nudging them, trying to get them to go this way, was the wanting to have that same standard of 154 game schedule at the time for the Negro Leagues and compare it to the major leagues and so forth. And it wasn't that type of game because, like you just said, I mean, there were people who owned these stadiums. They didn't have their own stadiums until
Right.
he built one. So everybody wanted their cut, right? You had the promoters and the booking agents and the stadium owners and the team owners and the players needed their cut, and so everybody had to do what they had to do in order to make this work. And barnstorming was a big part of that. And even though they only played, I want to say 1920, most teams played 60, 70 games. They barnstormed. I mean, it was a year-round thing.
Yeah.
And it really, like I said, the thing I think that a lot of people underestimate the impact of that, taking that brand and baseball to every corner of the continent, every small town you could think of. I just think it was monumental in the way baseball grew and how it helped build that major league brand, even though it was the Negro Leagues. I mean, I don't think they would admit that. But how much barnstorming did Josh Gibson do? He did quite a bit as well, right?
Yeah, he did quite a bit. And just want to touch on something you mentioned. As you mentioned, these guys play baseball all year round. And my grandfather used to call it, they never dropped the ball,
Mm-hmm.
because, as we all know, besides the barnstorming and exhibitions games, here in the United States, they also played in the Latin countries. You know, Josh
Yes.
played in Cuba. He played in Venezuela. He played in Puerto Rico. He played in Mexico. So besides the barnstorming and exhibition games here in the States, they played all year round. So these guys, you know, definitely had a full-time job and a full-time career. But that's how it was back then for them. So no, maybe they didn't play 154 games in the Negro Leagues, but by the time they got done playing
Yeah.
that year, they played 154 games, so or more.
Way more probably, right? Yeah.
Right, you're right.
Boy, what you said before is so true. I mean, it's unfortunate what has been lost. I mean, the boy, uh, over just complete nonsense. I mean, I just it just is frustrating to me. And so when you're talking about him going to Mexico and other countries in Latin America, they enjoyed it more there at the time, and no, you know, pretty simple reason why they could go there and be treated with the respect that they deserved, and not have to deal with coming back here and dealing with a lot of nonsense in a lot of places. So it's unfortunate.
We have an article where Josh was overseas and he didn't want to come back,
Yeah.
and Cumberland Posey threatened to put a lawsuit against him if he didn't come back. So he ended up coming back. But you're right, those guys. And again, you got to realize they're all the same skin color, you
Hmm.
know, and they have to deal with the racism, the things that we're doing here in the States. So yeah, if it was up to, I'm pretty sure not just Josh, but other players, they would have stayed over in Latin countries and finished their careers over there.
Every day on Twitter, I try to send out just some little piece, and a lot of times I'll pick, some a state, an area, a town, to what that connection is to the Negro Leagues, and some of the digging I do on like newspapers.com and places like that, right? Trying to find something that isn't just out there copying something off the internet, right? And one of the things I came across, which was really interesting to me, was there was an article in a newspaper in the I think it was right around 1936, 38. So Josh would have been probably in his prime then, right?
Yeah,
Um, but they talked about the all of the players of the Negro Leagues that were going to the Dominican Republic and Mexico, and how this was now a crisis. And I sent that out, and Bob commented, "Boy, that's ironic because here they wouldn't let these guys play in the major leagues, but now they're concerned because they're going to Mexico. I mean, come on." Where,
right.
where's the? There's a little bit of irony there that now they're concerned because what it's impacting um, their cut of the Negro League gate, I guess.
Yeah.
When they, you know, so that was a big reason why the Grays moved to Washington as well, right?
They didn't actually move. They just played half their
Oh, okay,
games.
yeah, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they just played half their games in D.C. It was more of a gentleman's agreement between the mayor of D.C. and the owner, Cumberland Posey. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of people always ask me, why is there a Josh Gibson statue at the Nationals ballpark? And I explained to him, well, during that time when he played for the Homestead Grays also played half their season at Griffith Stadium in Washington, D.C. And just most recently, when the Nats won the World Series, they were saying this is the first World Series they won in like so many years. And somebody's like, no, the Grays won it in 1943. And so it's been a lot of history in D.C. with the Washington Grays. Like I said, Josh been fortunate. He played for two great teams.
Hmm.
Some players will play in Pittsburgh and maybe Detroit or Chicago. I mean, he didn't have to leave. He played right here in both cities. I mean, one
Yeah.
city, two teams, and two great teams
Hmm.
and two good teams. So you look at that history. But yeah, the Grays had a great run, and part of that had to include DC, and so we're excited to be a part of the DC family. Like I said, Josh's statue is there. Um, the old site of Griffith Stadium sits on the new site is Howard University Hospital. They have a
Huh.
marker out there that talks about the Griffith Stadium and the players who played there. And so there's a tremendous respect for DC. And definitely for Josh Gibson as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, these are the kinds of stories that people need to hear because, like you said, if you got asked that, how many other people just do not uh, know the true story? Because there's so much myth out there too, right? I mean, in a way, that's unfortunate because you know. These were baseball players, and some were greats of the game, like your great grandfather, and others were just average ball players. They were ball players, and they were making a living, and that's how they did it. And so like, what would be one of those kind of myths or misconceptions about Josh Gibson that people should understand maybe isn't all the story or the true story.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about Josh Gibson, I mean, there's a lot of things about Josh as far as his baseball career,
Like
as far as
mythology.
his, yeah, as
Yeah.
far as his off the field. You've heard stories about him drinking and
Hmm.
things like that, and drugs. And I asked my grandfather that years ago, and he, from what he said to me, he never saw his father, heard his father do anything with drugs. Now, did he drink? Yes, he did drink, but he was not like he was a casual drinker like a lot of other people, a lot of other players, and just regular normal people. But I think sometimes people portray his, sometimes when you're so good and you're great, people try to find little things about you to blow them up, to
Sure.
try to discredit your talent. Um,
That's a common tactic, isn't it? I mean, even today, you see it every day like that. That's how people try to tear people down. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's
so
unfortunate.
yeah, but Josh, and again, I'll get into some personal stories. I mean, from the stories that I've heard from my family, one, he was a great family man. He
Hmm.
loved his children. Um, you know, like you said earlier, before we got on this call, he had a lot of tragedy as a young man.
Boy,
I
oh
mean,
boy. Yeah.
you have to realize he's already
Uh,
going through a lot of things with baseball, just trying to play baseball, dealing with all the racism.
Let
And
me.
then here he is at 18 years old, and his wife, my great
Yeah.
grandmother, she died giving birth to their twins.
I don't think a lot of
Um,
people know that part of the story. No.
yeah.
Hmm.
And the story is really that he wanted the doctor to save his wife and let the twins go, but it was already too late. And so
Boy, oh boy.
now here you are, a single father trying to play baseball to make a living to raise to support your children.
Hmm.
And so luckily his wife's family, the Mason family, raised the children while he continued his baseball career.
And
And
he was
so
how old? He was 18.
18, yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean that's a story. I told you earlier. I mean, everything about the Josh Gibson story and the legacy to me is just really inspiring, and I think people need to understand that this was not some Greek god of mythology. That these were he was a man who he endured a lot, publicly, personally, privately, and dealt with it and still accomplished what he did, and there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, I always say that. I mean, not just with Josh, just Negro League players in general.
Yes.
You know, again, we talk about the talent, right? So here you got the talent of these great players, but to me, it's the character because it's so much they had to endure just to get ready for a game. Major League Baseball players don't have to worry about death threats
No.
or any kind of racism or anything
Imagine.
that threats or anything like that. They went out and just played the game normally. But as a Negro League Baseball player, you had all these other issues in the back of your head in trying to play the game. So to me, when people talk about the talent, it's more than just talent. I mean, these guys had a lot on their mind just to play the game of baseball.
Hmm. Yeah, they really did. When I talked to Kevin L. Mitchell yesterday, we talked on that. He wrote that book about the 2006 special committee that brought in Negro League 17 Negro League players and executives, right? And so one of the players was Judd Wilson, who it seems like he had a temper, he had things that he did, but that was what was highlighted in a lot of the press of the day. That all the Negro League players were like that, and that's how they tried to paint them. And that that style of play is too rowdy. Let me tell you what. If anybody knows anything about baseball history, you go back to the 1800s into the early 1900s. That was a rough game. I mean, there was was a lot going on. Like you just said, these guys, the way they carried themselves and how they got through it, and with the adversity they had to deal with. I mean, it's commendable. It's a story that everybody needs to know about because it is impressive. So, did you ever think? I mean, I didn't know this till I was bumping around the other day. They made an opera about Josh Gibson.
Yeah, yeah, we were involved in an opera. So a good friend of mine.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So this actually project came to me, I should say, back in 2007, and I know nothing about opera. Not I wasn't an opera fan, and I'm thinking to myself, like, so a guy who wrote the opera, Dan Sonnenberg, who's a professor out there in Vermont, and he said, "Hey, I would like to do an opera on Josh Gibson." I'm like, an opera, you know. And my whole thing is, like I said, I know too many Black people don't go to operas.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've never been to an opera, and so fast forward, uh, 2015, he calls me and said, "Hey, I got a little bit of momentum. I know I had some things going on in my life. He got divorced, and then he had some triplets and family things. What was happening, and a lot of good things happening in his life. And so I get a call and say, "Hey, Portland, Maine, the orchestra, the opera there would like to do it's like a test, like a primo."
Mm-hmm.
And he had me come up for that. And at this primo, they invited different opera houses, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, Detroit, different opera houses to come see it. And hopefully somebody will like it and take it on. And I had a chance to meet the guys from Pittsburgh. And I said, "Hey, listen, if this opera is going to happen, it has to happen in Pittsburgh first. It has to be world premiered in Pittsburgh." And Christopher Hahn, who runs the opera here, we met one of my board members, and they told us they was going to bring the opera here in 2017. So, the thing with the opera, I would definitely say this, Phil, it gives you a whole different avenue
Mm-hmm.
of audience.
Yes.
And to see Josh's life be taken
Probably
and
blew you
portrayed
away, I'm sure.
into opera, it was just phenomenal. So,
I
yeah.
is it still running? I mean, I would love to see it. I really would. That would be incredible.
Yeah, so the way the opera world is again is different. It's artsy. So
Yeah.
the way that works is it ran in Pittsburgh in 2007, and then it went to Detroit in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it is, it's not up to the family or Dan who wrote the opera. It's up to the city who has the opera house to actually
Right.
pay for it. So the Pittsburgh has a lot of rights to it as well. So they have to contact Pittsburgh. It's a lot of paper. It's a lot of finagle. So basically, you have to have
So
the money. So it's not like people get it confused. Like it's a play where you can just go from city to city to city to city and
like
perform.
Tony Stone the musical. Have you
Right. It's
caught
no.
that?
It's not.
Yeah.
The opera's on a whole nother level, man. A whole nother level. So
I
there's
bet.
big money involved in operas. So
Boy.
yeah. So we hoping that we was trying to get it in Kansas City actually for the 2020 centennial. We were talking to the Opera House up in Kansas City, but of course, the pandemic hit and nothing really happened. So hopefully, we can get it somewhere else. If we do, I'll let you know.
Oh, I would love to see it. That would be so incredible. I know last year the Tony Stone musical did not tour because of the pandemic. I think they're going to get back out uh, on the circuit again this year, and that's on my list. I would love to see that as well. But a Josh Gibson opera, I mean, what could be more epic than that? I mean, that's that's just to me, it's incredible. So the talk. So obviously, Major League Baseball brings in the Negro Leagues. The seven Negro Leagues come in, and they're integrating those and have elevated them to Major League status, which we all know they already were. But
Like that, we're elevated.
yeah, I mean they already were. Everybody knew they were a major league. But now the big talk. I mean, and I would love to see it happen is the renaming of the MVP award. And you're involved in that process, or how does that all work? What can people do to help with that?
Yeah, and so Yeah. So before the announcement, though, of the integrating the stats, we had started this MVP campaign. Actually,
Oh.
it started last summer. And what happened was I was just reading an article. Ben Walker from the Associated Press was doing an article around the whole Black Lives Matters movement.
Mm-hmm.
And there were several former MVP winners who felt as though Kennesaw Mountain Landis' name should be off of the MVP award.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Terry Pendleton, Mike Smith, and Barry Larkin. And so as I'm reading the article, and they said the names are considered to rename the award. And as I'm reading, I see Branch Rickey, Frank Robinson. I'm like, oh, Josh Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
We had no clue. We didn't even know Josh was names even mentioned. And so I remember that evening shooting out an email to my board, and I have another separate committee. And I sent them the article, and I said, hey, man, we just found ourselves in a race. Let's see how we can win it.
Yep.
And from there on, we started this. Here's our MVP campaign T-shirts. And, we have some great momentum. And then the momentum even picked up a bit faster once the stats got included. And, now Josh will be in several MLB categories in the top 5, and maybe number 1 in all-time batting average, single season batting average.
Mm-hmm.
So great support, the Pittsburgh Pirates endorsed us, the Pirates manager, Derek Shelton, the late Dick Allen before he died, Reggie Jackson, a lot of celebrities, Andrew McCutcheon, and supported us.
Mm-hmm.
Max Starks, Franco Harris, the former Pittsburgh Steelers. And so it's been a great run. And basically for us, it's mainly just getting it out there, letting the Baseball Writers Association know that Josh has support and would love to rename the MVP award after him. We do have a website. It's strictly for the MVP campaign, which is jg20mvp.com. You can go on there. It tells you our story, our reasoning why we think Josh not as a good candidate, but a great candidate. There's also a petition. We're not looking for a certain amount of signatures, just put a petition together. That's also on the site. But the most important thing I want to say, Phil, is that the MVP award, as we all know, Kennesaw Mountain Landis was the guy who denied the African Americans an opportunity to play baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had did a story with ESPN Undefeated, and I talked about redemption, and how this will be redemption and also poetic justice. How ironic would it be for someone like Josh Gibson to replace the same person who denied not only him, but the other great Negro League baseball players opportunity to play in the majors. And so when I'm speaking about this, it's not just about Josh. I mean, of course, the award would be named after Josh, but when Seam His came out and they said there were 3,400 men between 1920 and 1948 that were denied the opportunity,
mm-hmm.
those are the 3,400 men that we're carrying on our shoulders,
mm-hmm.
and Josh should be carrying on our shoulders. So if this award is named after Josh, it's not just about Josh. It's about the 3,400 men that were denied the opportunity to play in the majors.
Absolutely. What can people do to help with this process? Who's going to make that final decision on that? Is it just Major League Baseball, or how are they going to handle that?
No. And so one thing they can do is, they can support, buy the T-shirts. What we do with the T-shirts.
I got the website up here on there for you now. So
yeah, what we do with the T-shirts, we ask people to take a picture of it themselves with the shirt and just say they support, Josh being renamed, MVP renamed after Josh, and then we'll share it on our social media. The other thing is sign the petition. It's on our website as well. Sign the petition.
Okay. How many signatures you got so far?
Like 2,500, something like that.
Well, we'll push. We'll get this. We'll see what we can do to add to those. Yeah.
And the other thing is too, if anybody's listening, I mean, just spread the word.
Yep.
Have me on either your podcast or interviews. I'm open to talk about this. The vote does not go through Major League Baseball. The vote goes through the Baseball Writers Association. They make the decision on that.
Mm-hmm.
People always ask me, do I know when it's going to happen? I do not know when it's going to happen. I can speculate. If you know the Baseball Writers Association schedule, they only meet twice a year. They meet during the All-Star break, and they meet during the baseball winter meetings. So of course their next meeting will be in July. So hopefully, we don't know for sure, but hopefully something will happen then.
Awesome. That would be. Um I will definitely get the word out and try to push this along. Get some more signatures on that petition. So I'm going to put up your foundation website here so people can see
Yeah,
the involvement that you guys have had, and tell us a little bit about you know you touched on it a little bit earlier about some of the things that you've been involved with the local community uh, youth groups. Um, there's a scholarship. You got some other things going on as well, right?
yeah. So like you said, our website is joshgibson.org. Our educational program consists of BOSA, or Business Sports Academy. We also have a STEAM program. We also have a mentoring program called Boys to Men. We also have a summer camp called Camp Challenge. We also have a called Legends of the Stars curriculum, and we also give out scholarships to inner city kids to pursue their education. So we have then we also, of course, we have our Josh Gibson Baseball Academy. I can't forget about that.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a Josh Gibson Baseball Academy. But of course, with the pandemic, all those things were shut down last year. All our after school programs, we were still up and running, but everything was virtual.
Mm-hmm.
We probably won't have a summer camp this year. We are hosting a Josh Gibson Youth Classic this year for ages 11 and 12. That's going to be August 27th through 29th. Originally, that was going to be hosted during the centennial celebration last year, and we wanted to bring in different teams from the cities of Negro League cities that represent their city. So a team from Kansas City that represent the Monarchs. A team from Chicago would have been Chicago American Giants. A team from Philly would have been the
Very
Philadelphia
cool.
Stars. Um, Due to the pandemic, we decided to not even go that route this year. Just do local teams because we don't want to get, with health reasons and the pandemic. It's just too much going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this: we do have a team coming from Josh's hometown in Buena Vista, Georgia. So we're excited about that.
Awesome.
They'll be coming. So then our other fundraisers we'll be doing this year is our celebration weekend. It was called the Centennial Weekend, but it's called our celebration weekend. October 29th, we'll be hosting a symposium of local and national speakers on the panel. And then on October 30th will be our big fundraiser, which is our Black Tie Gala. And at that award, we give out something called the Josh Gibson Legacy Award. And that goes out to a former Major League Baseball player based off his work off the field. And our past recipients have been from Buck O'Neill to Juan Marshall, the Lou Brock, to the Clemente family, to Reggie Jackson and Barry
Mm-hmm.
Bonds. And so we're hoping to get another big name to come in this year. So we're excited that those are in October. So we're hoping by that time we can have an in-person event. And so we'll see what happens.
Awesome. I think all the work that you're doing is just phenomenal. I think just like you said earlier, and what we're trying to do is tell the stories, get the word out there, get the grassroots efforts, working with kids, working with the community. I mean, that's what the game used to be, and I think it's kind of gotten away from that a little bit. That you know. It needs to maybe head back to because the state of the sport today is not what I mean. I don't know. I think a lot of people you tend to kind of look at your hey when I grew up it was this way and it was always better. That's not always true, but in some regards with the sport, I think it was better in the past, and maybe we can try to highlight some of those things like you're doing and so many other people and it's important. It really is because it's how the game grew to where it is. So, what else? What else is on your mind? Anything else you want to touch on with anybody that you think they need to know out there, or what else you got
I think we
going?
pretty much touched everything. I think the one thing is when I would say this, people ask about, we all know that the stats were integrated back in December, or the
Mm-hmm.
announcement, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
was announced back in December. And again, it was a great, you know, honor that the commissioner did that. But as you said earlier, we always considered Josh Gibson, and I'm pretty sure the other family members always considered their fathers and grandfathers major leaguers already anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And when you use the word elevating,
It's
that was a
unfair, yeah.
word that we were very like was wondering why they would use that word because it seems like they're elevating the Negro Leagues to their status. And
Right.
so
Yeah. To,
to use that word, it was very bothersome to
yeah.
us because
Like it was they're doing you a favor, right? Yeah.
right. And so we've spoken with Major League Baseball since then, and they apologize for using that word, and so we have some great conversations with John Thorne, who's the historian
Yes.
of Major League Baseball, on how the process is going to work and when this is actually going to happen. So we're very excited about it, though. As I mentioned before, right now, Josh, in 1943, he hit 441. And if that stands, he'll be the all-time
Mm-hmm.
single-season batting leader. So, he's second right now overall batting average behind Todd Cobb. He's fifth on on-base percentage. He'll be in the top five in slugging percentage. So Josh should be at least in some of the Major League Baseball top categories, at least in the top five in some of their spots. So we're very excited about that. And the one thing I will also say is that, for people probably listening, um, when I was getting these calls for interviews, 99% of the call, Phil, they was asking me, is Josh a new home run king? And so I had to explain,
Yeah.
to them, well, technically, no, because they're not counting, as we talked about, some of those games where they played barnstorming, exhibition, and of course in the Caribbeans. And so um, they're only counting the Negro League games, which you said is between about 60 to 70 games a
Mm-hmm.
season. And right now, I think Josh is at 329 or something like that. But he will not be the home run king. But as I always say, is that
Boy.
I'm fine with that. If I would
Mm-hmm.
just take one category to be the home run king, or take 4 or 5 of him being in the top five, we'll definitely take the 4 or 5 categories him being in the top five. So yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's just another thing like we talked about that got taken away. Bad enough there was the color line to begin with, but now these guys had to resort to 60, 70 games, sometimes less in a season. So that even now you're going to have people making the argument, well, they only played this many games. How could you compare that? And it's just so unfair. They had to do that. They were forced to do that, and they did the best they could, and they overcame it. And it's just what people need to understand and realize about the time period, the situation they were in, and all the credit to them. Really, I mean,
yeah. I mean, you said it though. It was not their choice.
no,
They would have loved
no.
to play.
Can you imagine today
100.
if somebody made the comparison and said, Mike Trout is the white Willie Mays? I mean, it just doesn't even make sense to me.
Well, also too, that someone made a good point. Last year they didn't play that many games due to the pandemic,
Yep,
so it was a circumstance, right?
yep,
So, but those stats will still be included.
yep.
So, yeah,
It was a Negro League season, yes.
right,
When you
exactly,
think about it.
exactly. Yep, there you go. But again, it wasn't. Those guys would have loved to play 150 games a year if they
Mm-hmm.
could, but
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't possible, and
Mm-hmm.
so they had to do what they had to do under the circumstances. And I'll tell you one thing, Phil, they did a hell of a job. So
Absolutely. I
yeah,
I, I would challenge anybody from today to try to do and perform at the level that they did and uh, under the conditions that they had to. I mean, it's impressive to me every time, and it's really hearing those stories from your grandfather and from the Negro League players that were still alive back in the late '80s, early '90s. That's what got me so interested in all this because it's just a story that's. In a way, it can't be any more American than that in a lot of different weird ways, overcoming and adapting and doing the best you can and making, lemonade out of lemons, I guess.
yep, yep.
This was great. I'm going to make sure that I get as this in front of as many people, and not just the foundation, but the efforts with the MVP award, anything that you guys are doing, I'll make sure that we get it highlighted because it's all part of all these stories that need to be told. Like I said, I'm going to have on several more authors and historians, and we'll keep doing this and trying to take it to another corner of the internet that maybe hasn't heard much about it. And I'm looking forward to it. And this was great. This was great.
I appreciate you, getting it out there. We need more people like you to spread the word. So I want to thank you for reaching out to me and giving me an opportunity to talk a little bit about the Negro Leagues and Josh Gibson and our MVP campaign, and of course our foundation. So I really appreciate your
It's
support
important.
and help.
It's
And
important. Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And maybe down the road we'll touch base again and do this again. You can give us another update and see where things are at. Hopefully, we'll have some good news on some of these things we talked about.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have some good news coming up between now and July.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. You have a good day.
You too.
All right.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Well, all right. That was awesome to have the great grandson of the legendary Josh Gibson on to talk a little bit of Negro League history, touch on the important work that Josh Gibson Jr. and others started with the Josh Gibson Foundation. It's just all part of uh, that story, the American story, baseball story. I just think it's important that we highlight all of these things and do it from as many different uh, avenues and viewpoints as we can. So in the near future, we're going to have some additional authors, historians, photographers. Tomorrow night, we're going to have Greg Kreindler on to talk about his art. That's going to be a late one. I think we're going to do it 9 o'clock Central. So I'll put something out on that. So here's a quick look at the 1920 season that we did a quick, as we ran a little long yesterday with Kevin L. Mitchell, which was great to talk about those things. But this is the 1920 May 31st standings. And what I'm planning on doing, there's a draft, the first year player draft that I've mentioned is coming up that has players in it such as Mule Suttles and Cool Papa Bell and others that I'm going to see if I can have several people on and maybe draft as a team and have a little fun with that. But we're at May 31st on the schedule. The Chicago American Giants are in first in the Negro National League, one game up on the St. Louis Giants, the surprising Dayton Marcos, and the Detroit Stars. And in the Eastern Colored League, Atlantic City is in a tight race with Brooklyn, the Royal Giants a game back, and the Cuban Stars East a game back. So I'm not going to do a simulation today. Just wanted to give an update on that and let everybody take a look at it. I will do one tomorrow night though and move us another week ahead. And then the following week we'll hit the draft and we'll have some more guests on and we will go from there. Phil S. Dixon's going to be on, author and historian barnstormer. I mean, fascinating when I've talked to him, his story of traveling the country and telling the story in as many little cities as he could. He'll talk more about it, but he did a 200 plus city tour of the country a few years back where he spoke and talked in any venue that they would have him about the history of the Negro Leagues and it's something that I've tried to highlight as well. There isn't a corner of the country in North America, for that matter, that didn't have a footprint of the Negro Leagues there. And I encourage people to go out and find it because it is there. You may not have heard about it growing up as I was, but I guarantee you, in talking to Kevin Mitchell yesterday, Scranton area where I grew up in Pennsylvania is a part of that circuit, the Poconos, where Negro League teams came through there all the time in the early days, early part of the 20th century through the, obviously the 40s and World War II, and it was there. I have found stories from Maine to Oregon to everywhere in between that, and it's just fascinating to me, and it's part of every small town's fabric. It's how they, in a lot of ways, grew the game of baseball back in the days, as I mentioned, with the barnstorming and these teams coming through and playing. And it's some interesting stories. And if you follow some of the ones I've done in the past, I mean, it's great to get a perspective on what was going on there and how the Negro League teams, when they would come, would play the local teams, and often, they could probably beat them pretty handily, but maybe in some cases took it easy on them because they wanted to be invited back and make sure that the next time they were not going to be greeted a little more rudely, because again, we're talking 1920, not the best racial and social climate of the times, and I'm hoping things change for the better today. But here we are 100 years later and still talking about some things that just, it's unfortunate, but it really, if you don't learn from your history, as the old saying is, you are doomed to repeat it. And anyway, I appreciate everybody tuning in. This will be saved out there, and you can check it out again. That was a great conversation with Sean Gibson. I appreciate taking his time. He's a busy man, I'm sure. But thank you, everybody, and we'll do this again tomorrow night at 9 o'clock Central with Greg Kreindler and his art, and I can hardly wait to hear some of the stories that he has. So I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.